When you think of the Bible, you probably picture angels with halos, gentle lambs, and peaceful doves. But did you know that the Bible actually describes over 100 different kinds of creatures? And some of them would give modern horror movies a run for their money? We're talking about massive dragons with 7 heads, flying serpents that breathe fire, giant sea monsters that make whales look tiny, creatures covered in eyes from head to toe, and beings so terrifying that just looking at them could drive you mad. Here's something that might shock you. Nearly 40% of the strange creatures mentioned in the Bible don't match any known animal, past or present. And of these mysterious beings, over half of them appear in prophecies and visions that even biblical scholars still debate about today. From the mysterious Nephilim, who were said to be giants walking among humans, to the fearsome behemoth whose bones were like bars of iron, these aren't just simple metaphors. They're detailed descriptions that have puzzled historians, theologians, and cryptozoologists for thousands of years. In the next few minutes, we're going to explore 50 of the most bizarre, fascinating, and downright terrifying creatures ever mentioned in biblical texts. Some of these beings might challenge everything you thought you knew about Scripture, and others might make you wonder if there's more to our world's history than we've been led to believe. Let's begin with number 50. 50. Rahab. Not to be confused with the biblical character, this Rahab was a mythical sea monster mentioned in Job 9:13 and Psalm 89:10. Described as a chaos monster who challenged God at the beginning of creation, Rahab represented the primordial forces of disorder that God subdued. 49. Azazel's goat. More than just a scapegoat, this creature mentioned in Leviticus 16 was specifically chosen to carry the sins of Israel into the wilderness. Some ancient texts suggest it was guided by supernatural forces to ensure it never returned. Remember to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What biblical creature fascinated you the most? And what other biblical mysteries would you like us to explore in future videos? 48. The night creature, Lilith. Isaiah 34:14 mentions this mysterious being. While later traditions expanded her story dramatically, the biblical text presents her as a creature of desolate places, haunting the ruins of fallen civilizations. 47. The wild beasts of the islands, Tannim. These creatures, mentioned in Isaiah 13:22, were said to inhabit the ruins of Babylon. Not regular wildlife, they were described as supernatural beings that would occupy the fallen city's palaces. 46. The satyrs, Seirim. Isaiah 13:21 describes these goat demons dancing in the ruins of Babylon. The Hebrew word Seirim literally means hairy ones, but these weren't ordinary goats. They were said to be wild spirits that haunted desolate places. 45. The morning stars. Job 38:7 tells us that the morning stars sang together at creation. These weren't mere celestial bodies, but conscious beings who witnessed and celebrated the birth of our world. 44. The host of heaven. Described as God's celestial army in 1 Kings 22:19, these beings formed ranks around the divine throne. They were warriors of light, different from regular angels, who fought in cosmic battles. 43. The death angel. While not explicitly named as such in Scripture, this being carried out the final plague in Egypt. More terrible than a standard angel, it had the power to distinguish between marked and unmarked houses while bringing death to the firstborn. 42. The auroch. Mentioned in Deuteronomy 33:17, this extinct wild ox was so powerful it became a symbol of divine strength. Unlike today's cattle, these creatures were massive and untamable. 41. The sea serpent, Tannin. Genesis 1:21 mentions these great sea creatures separately from other marine life. These weren't regular sea creatures, but primordial beings that ruled the ancient depths. 40. The pelican of the wilderness. Psalm 102:6 mentions this creature not as a regular pelican, but as a supernatural being inhabiting the desert wastes, symbolizing desolation and loneliness. 39. The owl of the waste. Paired with the wilderness pelican in Psalm 102:6, this wasn't a regular owl, but a creature that represented abandonment and divine judgment. 38. The powers of the heights. Mentioned in Romans 8:38, these beings were neither angels nor principalities, but a distinct class of cosmic entities that could influence human destiny. 37. The watcher in the temple. Malachi 3.1 describes a mysterious being called the Messenger of the Covenant, who would suddenly appear in the temple. Unlike regular angels, this being had special authority to purify and judge. 36. The Cloud Riders. Psalm 104:3 describes divine beings who make the clouds their chariots and ride on the wings of the wind. These weren't metaphorical but actual entities serving in God's cosmic court. 35. The Sons of Flame. Psalm 104:4 mentions these beings, often translated as ministers of flaming fire. They weren't just angels, but living flames that served in God's presence. 34. The Hosts of the High Ones. Isaiah 24:21 describes these beings as a hierarchy of powers in the heights above, distinct from earthly rulers and regular angels. 33. The Border Guardians. Mentioned in Genesis 3:24 alongside the cherubim, these were the flaming sword beings that guarded Eden. Not just weapons, but conscious entities that could move in every direction. 32. The Living Lightning. Ezekiel 1:14 describes beings that moved like lightning bolts between earth and heaven. These weren't natural phenomena, but conscious entities serving divine purposes. 31. The Throne Bearers. Distinct from the four living creatures, these beings mentioned in Ezekiel's vision had the specific task of bearing God's mobile throne, each with unique features for their cosmic role. 30. The Burning Ones. Different from seraphim, these beings mentioned in Daniel 7:9 were living flames that issued from God's throne, serving as both light and judgment. 29. The Ancient of Days Gods. Daniel 7 describes these beings as thousands upon thousands attending the Ancient of Days, not regular angels, but a specific class of cosmic courtiers. 28. The Wilderness Spirits. Numbers 21 alludes to these entities that inhabited the desert during Israel's wanderings, not demons, but mysterious beings that existed in desolate places. 27. The Day Stars. Mentioned in Job 38:7. Distinct from the morning stars, these beings had specific roles in marking time and seasons in the cosmic order. 26. The Prince of the Host. Daniel 8:11 mentions this being as a cosmic military commander different from Michael or Gabriel, who led the celestial armies. 25. The Cockatrice. Imagine a creature so deadly that a single glance from its eyes could turn you to stone. Meet the cockatrice, a hybrid monster mentioned in Isaiah 14:29 that combined the features of a rooster and a serpent. This wasn't your average barnyard chicken. Ancient texts described it as hatching from an egg laid by a rooster and incubated by a toad under a full moon. Do not rejoice, O Philistia, all of you, because the rod that struck you is broken, for from the serpent's root will come forth a cockatrice, and its fruit will be a flying serpent. 24. The Unicorn, Ram. Before you imagine rainbow-colored ponies, the biblical unicorn, or Raham, was anything but gentle. Mentioned 9 times in the Old Testament, this creature was described as an untamable beast of immense strength. Numbers 23:22 compares God's strength to that of the Ram, suggesting this wasn't your typical fairy tale unicorn, but rather a powerful wild ox that struck fear into ancient people's hearts. 23. The Flying Fiery Serpents. Described in Isaiah 14:29 and Isaiah 30:6, these weren't your garden variety snakes. These serpents could not only fly, but were said to breathe fire. Referenced during the Exodus as a plague upon the Israelites, these creatures have baffled biblical scholars for centuries. Some theorize they might have been inspired by real-life cobras that can glide through the air by flattening their ribs. 22. The Nephilim. Genesis 6:4 introduces us to one of the Bible's most controversial creatures, the Nephilim. Described as the offspring of sons of God and daughters of men, these beings were said to be giants who lived among humans before the Great Flood. Some ancient texts describe them as standing over 300 cubits tall, that's nearly 450 feet. Were they fallen angels, ancient astronauts, or something else entirely? The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. 21. The Leviathan. Perhaps the most terrifying sea creature ever described in religious text, the Leviathan appears multiple times in the Old Testament. Job 41 gives us the most detailed description, painting a picture of a massive sea monster with impenetrable scales, burning eyes, and smoke pouring from its nostrils. This wasn't just any sea creature. God himself uses the Leviathan as an example of his awesome power, describing it as a being that no human could hope to capture or control. 20. The Behemoth. Job 40 introduces us to a creature so massive that it moves its tail like a cedar tree. The behemoth was said to be the first of God's creations, a giant herbivore that eats grass like an ox, but possessed strength that no human could match. Its bones were like bronze bars, its limbs like iron rods. While some scholars suggest it might have been a hippopotamus or elephant, the biblical description suggests something far more extraordinary. Taist, the four living creatures. Ezekiel's vision describes four beings that defy imagination. Each had four faces: human, lion, ox, and eagle, four wings, and wheels within wheels covered in eyes. These weren't stationary beings, they moved like lightning, with wheels that could go in any direction without turning. Even more bizarre, they were said to be surrounded by something like burning coals of fire. 18. The Beast with Seven Heads. Revelation 13 presents one of the most iconic monsters in biblical literature, a creature rising from the sea with 7 heads, 10 horns, and crowns upon its horns. Each head was said to have a blasphemous name, and one of its heads appeared to have a fatal wound that had healed. This beast was given authority over every tribe and nation, and its appearance marked a crucial moment in biblical prophecy. 17. The Basilisk. Mentioned in Psalm 91:13, the basilisk was believed to be the king of serpents. Unlike our modern fantasy versions, the biblical basilisk was described as a deadly creature whose very breath could wither plants and split stones. Some translations call it an adder or viper, but ancient texts suggest something far more supernatural. 16. The Seraphim. These weren't your typical angels. Isaiah 6 describes the seraphim as fiery 6-winged beings who hover above God's throne. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. Their very presence shook the doorposts of the temple, and their voices were so powerful they filled the holy place with smoke. 15. The Giant Locusts. The book of Revelation describes locusts unlike any we've ever seen. These creatures had faces like humans, hair like women, teeth like lions, and tails like scorpions. They wore what appeared to be crowns of gold and breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like many horses rushing into battle. Their mission? To torment those without the seal of God for 5 months, but not to kill them. 14. The Ziz. Jewish mythology, drawing from Psalm 50:11, speaks of the Ziz, a massive bird so large that when it spread its wings, it could eclipse the sun. This celestial creature was said to be one of the 3 great beings created by God, alongside the behemoth and Leviathan. Legend says that if it dropped an egg, it could flood 60 cities. 13. The 4 Horsemen's Steeds. These weren't ordinary horses. Revelation describes supernatural steeds in distinct colors: white, red, black, and pale, or green. The pale horse, ridden by Death himself, was said to have Hades following close behind. These horses could traverse both heaven and earth, and their very presence heralded the end times. 12. The Ram with Strange Horns. Daniel's vision in chapter 8 describes a ram with 2 horns of uneven length, but that's just the beginning. As the prophet watched, one of its horns grew until it reached the stars themselves. This wasn't just any horn. It was said to cast stars to the ground and challenge the prince of the host. 11. The Living Wheels, Ophanim. Ezekiel describes perhaps the most bizarre angels in Scripture. Wheels within wheels, covered entirely in eyes. These weren't simple circles. They were complex, interconnected rings that moved in perfect unison without turning. They're described as part of God's chariot throne, but their appearance would be right at home in a science fiction movie. 10. The Bronze Serpent, Nehushtan. This creature, crafted by Moses under God's instruction, wasn't just a statue. Numbers 21 tells us that looking upon it could cure snake bites. While not a living creature, its power was so significant that it later became an object of worship, until King Hezekiah had to destroy it to prevent idolatry. The lion with eagle's wings. Daniel 7 presents this hybrid creature rising from the sea, a lion with eagle's wings. But the real shock comes when the wings are torn off and the beast stands upright like a human and receives a human mind. This transformation scene would challenge any modern CGI artist. Eat the cherubim. Forget the cute baby angels you see on Valentine's cards. Biblical cherubim were complex beings with 4 faces, man, ox, eagle, and lion, and 4 wings covered in eyes. Ezekiel describes them as the guardians of God's throne, wielding flaming swords. They were so awe-inspiring that their mere presence caused people to fall on their faces. 7. The many-eyed living creatures. Revelation 4 describes 4 living creatures around God's throne, each covered with eyes in front and behind. They never stop saying, "Holy, holy, holy," and each has 6 wings. These beings seem to transcend physical form, existing in a state between material and spiritual. 6. The Destroyer. This mysterious being mentioned in Exodus 12 was the agent of the final plague in Egypt. Not quite angel, not quite demon. The Destroyer was said to pass through Egypt, taking the firstborn of every unprotected household. Its true form is never described, perhaps because no one who saw it survived to tell the tale. 5. The Great Red Dragon. Revelation 12 describes a massive red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns. Its tail swept 1/3 of the stars from heaven. This wasn't just any monster, it was powerful enough to wage war in heaven against Michael and the angels. 4. The Ancient Serpent. Genesis introduces us to a serpent unlike any other. One that could speak, reason, and challenge divine commands. This creature, later identified as Satan himself, represents perhaps the most influential supernatural being in Scripture after God himself. 3. The 4 living creatures of Revelation. Different from Ezekiel's vision, these beings each had a distinct appearance, like a lion, an ox, a man, and a flying eagle. Covered with eyes and having 6 wings each, they never cease praising God. Their presence marks some of the most dramatic moments in Revelation. 2. The Watchers. These beings, mentioned in Daniel 4, were holy ones who descended from heaven to monitor humanity. Some ancient texts suggest they were responsible for teaching humans various arts and sciences. Their true nature remains one of Scripture's most debated mysteries. 1. The Divine Glory. While not strictly a creature, Ezekiel's vision of God's glory defies any natural description. Appearing as a human figure made of fire and gleaming metal, surrounded by rainbow light, this being represents the most awe-inspiring and indescribable entity in all of Scripture. These are just some of the mysterious beings described in biblical texts. While scholars continue to debate their nature and meaning, one thing is clear: the Bible contains far more extraordinary and mysterious creatures than most people realize. What other secrets might these ancient texts still hold? And what do these descriptions tell us about how our ancestors viewed the supernatural world? These 50 creatures we've explored today are more than just ancient curiosities. They represent humanity's eternal struggle to understand the divine, the supernatural, and our place in the cosmos. From the mighty Leviathan to the mysterious Watchers, each being tells us something profound about how our ancestors viewed the world beyond our ordinary reality. But perhaps what's most fascinating isn't just what these beings were, but what they represent. The Bible isn't just a collection of stories, it's a window into how people thousands of years ago tried to make sense of the extraordinary and the divine. These creatures, with their multiple faces, wings of fire, and forms that defied natural law, remind us that there has always been more to our universe than what meets the eye. Whether you view these beings as literal creatures that once walked the earth, metaphors for spiritual truths, or symbolic representations of cosmic forces, one thing is clear: They continue to capture our imagination and challenge our understanding of what's possible. Today, as we stand at the crossroads of science and faith, these ancient descriptions take on new meaning. Could some of these beings be early attempts to describe phenomena we're only now beginning to understand? Or do they point to realities that still lie beyond our comprehension? The next time you open the Bible, remember, between its pages lurk creatures that would make our most fantastic modern monsters seem tame by comparison. And perhaps, just perhaps, these ancient descriptions are inviting us to look beyond our ordinary world and contemplate what other wonders might still await discovery. Remember to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What biblical creature fascinated you the most? And what other biblical mysteries would you like us to explore in future videos?